let me introduce the great lineup today. The three of us look a little bit older than the typical audience here. We come with a lot of real life stories and battle scars from trying to use data and also to try to use human judgment to fix some of the real issues on the ground in mining, in sustainability of agriculture value chains, as well as also financial crime, and also looking at providing professional services. So, I'm not sure whether you can see to my left or right. Oh, maybe we should just do a virtual handshake right now with Salvatore and Mark. So to my right is Mark Woodley. He moved from Australia to Indonesia, armed with a lot of lessons from how data science can work, and also how to actually marry the reality of problems on the ground with what technology can do, and also with implementation advice on the ground. So he's not here to say, I told you so, even though a lot of times that is his job. He's here to actually share with us a couple of case studies on how data actually can help us deal with risks such as deforestation, loss of goods, and also tracing sustainability efforts. To my left, the amazing Salvatore. So he's had a few iterations in his career thus far. He came from mining, and as we know, mining is a messy business. And then he went into a messier business, which is natural rubber, and also the economics of smallholder livelihoods. So as some of you might not realize, natural rubber is very much tied to personal protection, mobility, and it is one of the strategic reserve materials that every single country stocks at times of war or extreme conditions, such as right now in COVID, right? So we have seen that supply chains become disrupted, and this word about sustainability nowadays is not about how do we do things better and afford people a QR code to scan. Well, we have to look at what is it that we're actually doing with all the technology that we're talking about of changing the reality on the ground in developing economies. If we're trying to educate, say, farmers, miners, and also logistics providers, and many other facilitators on the ground on how to improve their working conditions, how to improve the yield of their crops and commodities, reduce disease, balance water and also soil conditions, reduce the use of chemicals, preserve safety, and also achieve fair pricing and retain some ability for bargaining of prices and financial freedom. These are lofty ideals. Can we deliver them with technology? Are we in a position to make real change right now? Or do we have to actually plan on getting a lot of investment, setting up a unicorn, going IPO, and then we can do something? So these are the topics that we wanted to discuss today. I want to make it as interactive as possible. So Mark will give us a little bit more structure, sharing a bit of experience on the 4 use cases he's thinking about running through with you. And then Salvatore and I will actually be jumping in, sometimes with our own little personal anecdotes, sometimes with questions, and then if you can provide comments or even questions throughout the process, don't be shy, fire, and also we'll try to address it in as organic and also as seamless way as possible. So yeah, I look forward to having this conversation. We have another 15 minutes to go. So I hope that we're going to have a informative session and we can learn from each other in this process as well.
Can you see that?
Is it clear?
Yeah. So hi everyone. As Yvonne said, my name's Mark. I'm an analytics practitioner primarily. So I'm based in Jakarta, and my job is to really help clients draw insight from data. One of the ways we've been trying to sort of help clients in this way is around sustainability insights, as I've called it here. And I thought it'd be good just to show or talk about some practical examples of where people in industry are really using data to really enable, I guess, insights in a sustainability sense. And like I had 7 case studies here to talk to you, but I'm not going to talk to you about all of them. I can make this information available to you at the end of the presentation, but I just have time to talk about probably 3 or 4 of these at the moment. So I thought I'd just give you a bit of perspective around what this actually means, just to give you some insights as to how people are actually using, I guess, data from a sustainability point of view. Like in Indonesia, I'm based here. Like illegal oil tapping is a problem, and by that I mean there's lots of oil actually in Indonesia spread out over a vast amount of land, and therefore the environment which operators here tend to deal with is that they've got many, I guess, instances of people, and these are people like just coming along with a truck with a pipe, tapping into the pipeline, or indeed tapping into the ground, setting up their own like little oil rig, and really trying to sort of steal or take that naturally oil out of the ground and for their own benefit. And it's like the loss, and this has been estimated to be about 670,000 US per day here in Indonesia of this illegal tapping. So it's a major issue. So with that being the problem or the issue, what is a possible solution to not only stop theft or loss, but it's also to sort of save the, I guess, the environment in terms of like stopping all of these people coming along with the oil spilling all over the place. There is a capability where you can actually employ cameras and ground sensors. So what I mean here is that if you can install cameras, you can install ground sensors, which you can see in this screen here. These are screws. These cameras and ground sensors in combination can detect illegal movement, whether that be through video or through sensor or vibration from the ground. And in combination, in real time, back to a command and control center, they can actually detect any activity which is or where people are intruding into zones which are forbidden. So think of this as using, I guess, video combination of video analytics and AI and machine learning on the back to really determine in real time intrusion. And we can see this use of this technology being quite widely adopted. It started actually in the army, is where this technology started, but it's now being employed to more in a wider sense, and oil and gas is certainly one of those areas. And the whole purpose here is to really, I guess, for the owner of the oil and gas, is to stop theft and loss. And these capabilities which I'm describing here are an interesting way of using technology to really further insight and really try and get on top of risk in real time. So that was one thing. Yvonne, should I just be keeping on going? Or did you want to ask some questions, or they keep going?
I think this is really interesting for us, right? Because the reality on the ground is that a lot of the product loss, food loss, and also input losses, right? People just kind of take it for granted. At the end of the day, a lot of the technology monitoring is required. It's just that I think folks tend to think technology in sense of software, right? Rather than integrating with hardware. And they think of data as in nice streams of data from APIs, rather than thinking about how it works on the ground. So yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting.
And I think this same application or technology, of course, can be employed in a plantation sense. And in fact, you don't like them. The cameras can actually have a range of up to probably 500 meters, and as well as that, you see people actually using drones in some cases, of course, with real-time video feed back to like a command center. So the technology is out there which allows you to look for this theft or this loss, and that prevention techniques using technology is certainly something which is right at the forefront now of many businesses which have plots of land or assets to protect and guide. And this is just an example in oil of one of them.
I think oil is it's pretty easy to track, but given the price of oil dropping, I wonder what's the input. What is the impetus for doing so nowadays, right? But I do hear that durian, right, which is a very expensive fruit in Southeast Asia, the loss, right, going from the plantation to collection center on average is between 10 and 20%. Mysteriously, those valuable cargoes go missing, right? Meanwhile, for things such as natural rubber, where you have buckets of latex or bundles of couplons, right, which are solidified latex, those thefts are a bit harder to actually detect because they tend to commingle everything. So I think on a use case basis, I think Salvatore is laughing because good luck putting cameras in plantations where there is no electricity, no internet, no nothing. Good luck.
Not easy, but also I think the value of oil is much higher than the one of natural rubber, and so it makes a lot of sense in this field. And actually, I want to ask Mark, how extensively these kind of technologies are used already?
Look, I think the technology has actually been around for 2 or 3 years, and as I said, it's mainly deployed in a military sense before, to protect military assets. So this technology is just more recently being applied to other industries outside the army, outside the police, and oil and gas in one of them. Mining, of course, could be another around protection of assets. But people are even talking about this if you want to protect buildings like an embassy or an official government building, which is important. So it's the same sort of technology, just can be deployed for different purposes.
Okay, sounds cool.
Just on the electricity sense, it's not all bad news if there's no electricity, because a lot of this runs off battery power for a very long time.
Very cool. Yeah. Shall we move to the next one? I'm very keen to listen to it.
So the next one is about deforestation, and I can speak with direct experience on this. We had a client who was really interested in assessing, and they really look after, I guess, massive amounts of land, and they were really concerned about people coming in and just chopping down trees for their own purposes, a bit like the oil example, but we're talking about trees and forests now. And the problem was, given the vast amounts of land, they just couldn't really have enough people to go and just sort of drive around in trucks or the like to really see if this deforestation had actually was occurring. But they knew it was occurring because they could actually sense that when they did their monthly checks. So the problem is, how do you determine deforestation across vast amounts of land when you only have limited resources at your capability? And by resources, I mean, there's only so much you and I can do and thousands of people walking through forests can do. So the solution here, and this was using satellite imagery. So this particular, I guess, client we were working with, they paid to get satellite images. These images were produced on a 21-day rotation. These images were then analyzed. So the imagery was converted into structured data, and predictive algorithms were then used to compare one image to the next. So looking at the granularity of the images to see whether, and determine what a tree-laden environment might be versus an environment where there's no trees. So obviously, if you're comparing and using analytics like AI and machine learning to detect what a tree is versus what a tree-free environment is, you can then compare this over this is what they're doing on a 21-day cycle to really determine whether there's any deforestation occurring. Now, of course, some of the deforestation is because of themselves, because it's their business too. So they have to allocate sections in this where they know about the deforestation because it's because of the business itself. But in the cases where deforestation shouldn't be occurring, those areas are marked by the analytics, and then they send field workers just to validate that in a more focused sense. So once again, using AI and machine learning, looking at satellite imagery, converting the imagery into structured text, producing polygons of, or polygons representing masses of land, and then comparing them on 21-day cycles for change.
I think this is very interesting because it's closer actually to what I'm doing now. But and also we investigated this possibility to look at different pieces of lands in different countries, regions, and try to understand if you can use for deforestation for sure. Now you can also compare the same land over the years, so you can get images going also backwards on time and comparing if really in that area or in a specific area there is deforestation. Images actually are very much free of charge. Today you can actually have images for free. If you just use, for instance, the Copernicus project sponsored by the European Commission, you can get those images for free. What is expensive and has a cost is actually to read the images, and especially in cases of commodities as rubber, where in certain countries like Indonesia, basically borderline with forest. So sometimes it's not easy to spot which one is natural rubber and which one is forest itself. It's important to have someone that is really capable to read, and also sometimes you need on-field verifications. No, but this is a very powerful tool. I think with Copernicus and the satellite that they use, you can reach 90% cover of this, and I think it's a very powerful tool. Now, of course, there is a cost, and that is the main point.
I'm going to be very nasty right now, right? Because I'm going to start to define what deforestation means. Because deforestation is not always bad or always human-made, right? So there are three types of deforestation. Number one is natural. Trees drop leaves because there are seasons, right? And they need to shed their leaves. That's what they naturally do. So rubber trees, they go through wintering, right? A couple of months a year, and depending on the climate, coniferous trees, they do naturally shed. So that's one, natural deforestation. But that's not a loss of tree, it's just the density of tree cover changes, right? Number two, legal deforestation, meaning that whoever that cut down the trees or even burnt down the forest had a legal approval by whatever regulators allow them to do. But for example, Amazon, right? By local laws, they did it legally, but by international perspective, it's unacceptable. So there is that question there. And then lastly, it's accidental, right? Because when forest fires spread in Australia, in California, in many other states, you can't stop it. And then, you have this kind of situation where everybody start to link this concept of deforestation automatically with illegal forest clearing. And also illegal forest clearing, in a lot of the sense of qualifying for insurance and other kind of triggers for redress, requires permanent loss of forests, right? And in suing, you have to see, all right, how do you tell? Just because it's a loss of density or that the chloroform concentration, right, that satellites can read nowadays in the ground cover has changed, it doesn't mean something illegal has happened. It doesn't mean that something worthwhile for the attention of the international community has happened. Then we need to see what is worthwhile. So it's not just analyzing the imaging. A lot of other things. I think the next use case that Mark is going to be introducing is going to be interesting because you have to correlate, right? Was there an increase in the toxicity of air, of water, of soil, right? What were the impacts on the surrounding environment, the social network, the people and the animal biodiversity? What are the detrimental effects those things has been having rather than just seeing there's a loss in density, right? We need to know whether it's natural, whether it's accidental, whether it's illegal, or whether it's something that actually is legal by local means, but internationally contravenes every single convention there is, right? For example, we know after Trump has now lost the election, he's very busy auctioning off the rights to dig up oil in Alaska right now. So is that going to be something that's worthwhile? I think some of the satellite imaging tools are going to be used, right, by some interested parties to actually track activities, right? So these are a lot of thoughts for us to think about. Data point is not just one, right? Correlation is not causation. And also what kind of things we can do about it requires a lot more consideration and a lot more triangulation.
Yeah, no, I think I am glad that you actually said so. But whatever the deforestation is coming from, I think these are powerful tools that can be used to actually address what is the reason what are causing it. And as I said, maybe they are not the only one that can use to do so. I think also on-field inspection sometimes is important to do to address where the real issues are.
Yeah. I think that field work comment is critical because the analytics will identify potential issues. They still need to be validated, by a field worker, but it's a field worker going to a precise location, not working aimlessly across thousands of hectares of land. So yeah, that validation on the ground is still important. Just for those of you who are interested in the technology here, the key thing is actually not the imagery itself. The key thing is using AI to train the computer as to how to detect what a normal forest might look like versus a deforestation and the differences between the two. And there's some smarts in that. Just like another client has asked us to count pineapples in a field, right? You've got to recognize what a pineapple looks like using imagery, which is different from other fruits. So you've got to train the AI to recognize imagery appropriately. Okay, I'll move on, Yvonne. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think the next one is going to be highly relevant as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't go through all of them, but this was just very briefly on this one. We were looking at, I guess, water stress and looking at ways of trying to identify where there may be, I guess, a lack of resources when it comes to water. And there are various players out there where using, this is once again, like satellite imagery again, but this is for a totally different purpose, to look for, like, look at the ground and look at what's there and look at what's in the ground in terms of moisture, density and the like. And as I guess Salvatore probably knows, like, this imagery can get very granular around a number of measures. And you might just think you're looking at a picture of a field or a picture of a mountain, but there's a bunch more other parameters that is provided in combination with that imagery. And that can give you a view around not only the water table, but around resources other than that, which can really give you some good insights around the risk of water not being there in the future. And it can also predict, of course, where water may actually accumulate and where you should think about putting dams and the like, given natural topography and contouring. Just I guess this is once again using similar imagery, but a different problem.
We have a question from the audience or a comment. You know, they found it would be interesting to discuss training AI to count pineapples. Right? The training AI is always the tricky part, right? It's not just training pineapple, you know, for like spotting pineapple. Maybe we should talk about it. You know, all of the funky fuzziness of training AI.
Look! I think that's a good comment. Like the risk with algorithm bias. So can you actually, if you don't train the computer right, it won't recognize a pineapple versus another fruit. So you've got to invest heavily in that upfront training and of the AI before you actually release into production. Because that is the critical part. Otherwise, you get algorithmic bias, which is going to lead you to a wrong answer. But yeah, identifying a pineapple is not easy, but it can be done.
It's good. At least, you know, we're not dealing with human behavior, right? Unlike, say, the Apple credit card, right? On the gender bias. Oh my God, that's a whole different kind of worms.
I might just move on, Yvonne. If,
yes, please.
And I think, as I said, I'm not going to talk about all of these examples.
I think the IoT things will be really awesome. I'm dying to hear about that.
I'm just skipping to this. Like one of the, I guess, the things which is within the grasp of many businesses. It doesn't, like we talked about, some of the solutions before do have a price, of course, but like the Internet of Things, and we can see more and more clients and people using IoT devices. And you can see an example of these on the right-hand side, like smart meters, lighting, air quality, water. There's like vibration or noise. There's a whole lot of IoT devices there that you can employ these days at relatively inexpensive cost to actually determine whether there's a sustainability or environmental issue at hand. And these images collect data in quite granular form, and that data can then be fed back to a central repository, which can be then analyzed. So whether your challenge is noise, whether your challenge is vibration, whether your challenge is dust, like air quality and the like, there are sensors for all of these. And Yvonne, like I think we can see this as being one of the, I guess it's already there, but it's certainly emerged quite greatly in recent times because this is affordable for most people.
Yeah, because, you know, nowadays IoT, right, thanks to a lot of commodity appliance producers like Philips or Xiaomi, right? You can get a smart switch to actually do your own IoT, right, in whatever way possible. And I think the last time I checked, a smart meter and also a smart switch goes down as low as less than $5 sync, right, per piece, one from Xiaomi. Anyway, we have a question about how does data and also AI play into solving or addressing part of the problems of plastic in Southeast Asia. So I think, you know, again, it will be quite interesting for us to look at how do we triangulate, right, on the different data sources here.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Mark. You say.
No. I was going to ask Yvonne because I didn't hear the question properly. But you
plastic
talk, maybe,
in Southeast Asia. I think Mark needs a drink of water. See, I have my coffee here, and he just hasn't had any sip at all.
maybe Salvador, you can answer the question.
Not about plastic. I wanted to say a couple of things on smart agriculture. That is on.
Oh yes, please.
that is on your slide. Because in rubber, now we saw very interesting applications in China. As you know, one of the issues for natural rubber production is productivity right now. So there is a trend and willingness to increase productivity over time. Now, how to do that? The Chinese, they have put some interesting machines directly for tapping the trees, for instance. And so you see these machines tapping the trees and the latex going through cables and then collected. That is quite interesting and certainly efficient, because also one issue that in rubber we are facing is the lack of skilled workers. So now looking at the future, it could be a possibility. But at the same time, we have to be careful, because these technologies certainly increase productivity, but on the other side decrease the number of jobs available. And on the other side, I think we need a different kind of farmers if this kind of technology should be used in a wider scale, because you might need people that are better understanding of math or statistics and how to deal with the data and information that are collected through this activity. So what I'm saying is IoT, very interesting, but we have to be careful, especially in South Asian countries, and also in African countries, to avoid that jobs are lost, and providing more support in terms of literacy, math, and schooling to smallholders and farmers in general.
You're being so kind, Salvatore. You're not saying the hidden thing there, which is unless you provide incentive for the locals who might feel threatened by the IoT, they will sabotage it. They will either sabotage it willingly or accidentally because they don't know how the IoT device actually works to help them, right? We've seen so many times where there are IoT devices that were put into factories or even production sites that were mistakenly being seen, right, as by the locals as something else, and ended up causing a lot of damage to things that are air scrubbers, right, or detecting the effluents, right, in water and things like that, or even providing the emergency brake for saws and for even like automatic weighing bridges. So that's the problem there. Technology is there to enable humans to actually do what we do better and also produce more efficiency. But if we don't engage the humans in the right way and provide them incentive to cooperate, the technology cannot actually work in the right way. And we've seen that a lot of times, similar to the illegal oil tapping case study, if the economic incentive is there for people to actually destroy property, sell it for scrap, sabotage it, they will.
Yeah, well, we have an opportunity there. And I think technology provided an opportunity also for bringing back young people to this kind of sectors, because I think it will be certainly more interesting and fascinating for young people to work in an agriculture sector that actually use these new technologies and also can use better their own skills that, as I said, might be different from the skills of the past.
Yeah. I think it links quite nicely to the next case study, on social impact. I think Mark has.
I'll just answer the question about what's the role of data in solving plastic pollution across Southeast Asia. I think that solution is not as strong as it should be, to be quite honest. I can't see too many use cases where that has actually been employed from my point of view. And even though it obviously should be employed more, where I do get a sense of this being used, and I know from experience, some of the ports and some of the beaches and the waterways, like the resort areas, are employing detection, like in the air, just like in Australia, you check beaches for sharks, whereas over here, you probably don't really need to check for too many sharks, depending on where you are, but you can use the same technology to detect for floating objects. that may or may not be plastic, but the key here is to train how to recognize like a bucket or a can or something, as opposed to a fish or a turtle or something. So once again, I don't think that's being employed as widely as it should, but the technology's there.
I think also, Mark, maybe we have to dissect that question a bit more, right? Which is, in how solving plastic pollution is a very loaded question, right? Solving it's not just saying, hey, we can see there are plastic waste. We can say that aloud many times. It doesn't make the plastic disappear. We need to look at two sides, supply and demand, right? Where the hell are the pollution coming from? How do we stop it? Right? And then on the other side is, okay, so we should reduce the amount of plastic entering into our ecosystem. And then how do we actually detect where the clusters of plastic pollution are and get rid of it in some ways, right? So maybe, the other side of it is, the kind of solutions that people can have in alternative uses of waste, for example, right? Or processing new materials, and also using data to actually assess how much damage those kind of plastic pollutants are creating in the environment, right? I think we have to possibly help whoever is involved, right, in that ecosystem, break down the problem to bite-sized portions so that people can actually do something about it, right?
But also, I think part of technology, I think a big role might be played by governments in this because governments have to put in place the right frameworks and regulations to avoid that we actually get a lot of plastic and food waste. So the use of plastic overall, I think, is the first objective.
And I think the issue of waste obviously will be more important to some countries than other. And I would suggest in Indonesia at the moment, like plastic waste is not on the top agenda item, whereas Singapore probably could be more appropriate for sort of some of these issues. So it does depend on where you are and the priority at the time.
Yeah, and I think it ties in very nicely to your next case, because I think theory of change is something that people don't really talk about, right? Because theory of change actually is one of the key items, I think, that brings a lot of priority and also process to solving a problem that we see, right? And it kind of links very nicely to how do we connect, the problem-solving parts with the resources that are there, because the theory of change, as agreed upon by the stakeholders and also by whoever is championing for change, is a very good roadmap that we can actually use. So maybe we can possibly use your use case on
this is the last example that I'll talk about, and I guess the example here, and this is a real there's a real live engagement here in Indonesia with respect to this. So the question is being asked, okay, given the initiatives around sustainability, what sort of things can we as stakeholders or shareholders stakeholders communicate to our shareholders around the net benefits that have been generated as a result of sustainability initiatives? So how can we actually look at this and really report on the impact that we're having in the community? And I think that's a really good problem statement, because often we figure and we guess and we think about the impact for ourselves and our business, but we don't often think about the impact for the community or the environment. And I think it's a really interesting concept, and I must admit, like this is the first one which we're trying to sort of put a bit of I guess flesh on the bone with respect to how we actually measure this, and I think we probably should catch up a bit more on this later once we've actually done the work. But this particular I guess client of ours is interested in impact themes you can see on the bottom right hand side. So they're interested in agricultural outcomes, economic inclusion, and in climate change. So using, I guess, trying to understand the impact of their environment, sustainability, environmental initiatives. So how are they helping or assisting others outside the business? And Yvonne, I think that's a really interesting topic to consider. It's not easy to measure.
Yeah,
but it is an interesting topic.
It is it's a complex topic, right? And also in terms of measuring all these change, and also the other side of it, I think Hui Ji Go asked a very interesting, and another anonymous participant asked a question about, well, how about the data? How do we actually, should the data usage for sustainability solutions be regulated? And also how should these data sets and models be shared and also be kept in a transparent way for the industry to benefit, right? Because, you can measure change, but then the thing is, if you're not able to actually articulate these outcomes to the right stakeholders, it's all for naught. And data sovereignty rules actually prevents the sharing of private data of citizens of pretty much every single country in Southeast Asia, right? And also enterprise data are subject to a lot of confidentiality issues, and also the validity and also the availability of cloud infrastructure stops the sharing and also the acquisition of data that we see. So, it's not that sustainability data is plentiful or that they are already very smoothly shared. It's more like a case of, how do we actually unblock a lot of those problems, right? Because the perception I think a lot of folks have on data privacy is very strong. But in this region, what they don't realize is that it's the other way around. It's not that there's not enough regulation, there's too much. We actually really struggle to even make use of data that are there because of many of the constraints that we have.
Yeah, there is also more about this in relation to data. I think once again, here what is really needed is some kind of regulation in relation to the data that are generated by using these new technologies, and because potentially it can bring to increase disparities. And if you think, for example, the value chain as WAPA, where from one side we have farmers, smallholders. Just for your information, 90% of the world natural production is produced by farmers, by smallholders. It's less than 50 hectares land. And on the other side, we have big corporations, huge companies producing tires, gloves, whatever on the other side. So who is collecting this data and how this data will be used? And furthermore, who is actually verifying the accuracy of data? Because when we speak about sustainability and social, economic, and environmental issues, I think the environmental side it's relatively easier to approach, but the economic and social side are very, very, very difficult. And but are the most important one, because I am more and more convinced one side that we can speak about environment and whatever, but at the end, if all these activities doesn't bring to the communities and people working inside and outside these economic activities better living standard, we didn't achieve much at the end. I think the goal should be to make sure that people in communities all around the world, not only in Southeast Asia, but I think also Africa, for instance, they have to improve, we have to improve their living standards. And I think this is very, very important to address.
And just back to my deforestation example, the client there actually is putting on their public website any evidence of deforestation, and indeed the fact that they've managed to stop deforestation because of their detective measures. So they're very open and transparent about how their efforts are having a positive impact where it's stopping the amount of deforestation that has occurred in the past. So once again, if you're doing this and it's for good, you shouldn't be shy about communicating the outcome.
And I think also, one of the attendees, I'm going to address this question live now, so mentioned qualitative data, right? So qualitative data ties in with both of your comments. So Salvatore was talking about social. So social data a lot of times is qualitative, and it is not the easiest thing to secure because it's highly private. It need identity, which a lot of subjects that you interview don't even have, right? Smallholder farmers sometimes don't have legal identity cards, recognized title to actually work on the land, right, for example, or even any kind of or means of actually verifying or some third party verifying what they share about the qualitative attributes of that data, right? So how do we work on better incorporating these kind of qualitative data in sustainability solutions that points towards better addressing diversity, inclusion, and also positive community impacts, which again is a little bit of a subjective situation, right?
Yeah, I think first we have to have that data.
But then you go to the village, you don't speak their language, right? It takes you a week of cold showers and those shitty little propeller planes, I'm sorry, that we both used to get onto to go to Myanmar or wherever to see those guys. And it takes you how long to even get their trust even to speak to you without shooting you, right? Then how do we actually make it properly?
Because I can tell you, one big problem is we're just missing data. I mean, we really, when we speak about communities, we really don't know exactly how many people are involved in rubber production, for instance, how many families, how many women, how many men, and so on and so forth, and how many children, if because there is also certainly an aspect relative to the children also working, in these fields. So we need to know all this information. I mean, because otherwise, if we don't know anything about it, it will be very difficult also address any issues. Gender equality is very important. It's strictly connected with anything else. If we speak about climate change, they are very much linked, and we have a lot of women actually working in the natural rubber plantations, and it's very important to raise those issues and try, but with the goal of solving them. So I think we first need quantitative data, and once we have some realistic quantitative data, now we can move forward to qualitative, to qualitative information.
So qualitative information becomes interesting because, okay, you share those information, but what does it mean, right? Does it actually satisfy the reporting standards? Does it satisfy the investors or financiers or customers checklist or what they actually need to see, right? So sometimes it's not just about you collecting data, but also fitting it to what the decision makers and whoever that has the power to make change, right, in how they make those decisions, right? So a lot of them, unfortunately, don't really take into account enough of the qualitative information because it's difficult for them to weigh, right, whether something is more important than the other without quantification, right? So that brings into quite nicely us addressing this question by anonymous attendees. So how do we evaluate if one long-term organizational impact weighs more than the other in different regions? You see, these kind of questions is very philosophical in a way, right? Then it's not easy, right? And then, yeah, I mean, we face this kind of things every day. And also, I think we just have to sort of, put some framework and some thought about it, because at the end of the day, we have to do evaluation with a goal. What are we trying to do? Are we just trying to say good and bad for the sake of saying that, we can make a judgment, or that we are trying to direct resources, change pricing for fairness, or we're trying to afford risk management to provide a floor of basic livelihood for people, or reduce the exposure of certain entities to supply chain risk? What is it that we're evaluating for, right?
Yeah, look, I think, and there's a question here also around, getting good quality data up and down the supply chain. Look, I think if we expect good quality data, we're going to be eternally disappointed. And in fact, being an analytics practitioner, I know there's no such thing as good quality data. And part of the analytics proposition is to make poor data better, not ideal, but poor data better. So part of the solution, the answer to that question is around having the right analytics to get the data in the right shape and form. But of course, the more the more embryonic way of making sure you collect the right data in the first place.
That's true.
And that's where, and Mark, I just typed this question in, I think, Mark, it's an answer of two for me. One is employing smart analytics to get insight out of data which may not be as good as you would hope. But secondly, it's about influencing stakeholders up the supply chain or down the supply chain to collect the right data in the first place. And it's people like us who are doing analysis who need to communicate what we want. Remember, they're not doing analysis, they're more on the collection side. So we need to work with them collaboratively to tell them what we want. So hopefully we can get it.
Yeah.
No, I agree with Mark. I think depends what we mean with good quality data. I mean, good quality data is the one that best represents the realities you are investigating, right? And the level of accuracy might be disappointing, but I think there should be an effort in that kind of direction. Because sometimes you see also social data, when they are collected, no one is actually looking at the level of accuracy of this data. So this data move along the value chain for the first supplier to the other users, but no one really knows if those data are accurate or how accurate actually they are. So I think that there should be an effort in that direction, and should be done.
And jumping in there, right? A lot of times we have to design something, a process scientifically. When you're trying to do data analytics, you're trying to test hypotheses. You can't prove something is correct or something is real with one pilot. You tend to prove these factors are not material, right? In your hypotheses, you disprove your hypotheses, and then you go towards actually refining your theory. So sometimes, when we actually explain to stakeholders, when you're using data, what are the models? What are the assumptions? What are the things you can actually achieve? It's not that you throw good data at it and it automatically spits out an answer and it solves your woes. Probably doesn't, right? And if we look at some of the behavior, right, that we're trying to test for, such as what some of I think Ian was trying to refer to, about using AI to develop new metrics to measure organizational impact. We're talking about emergence of decentralized agents, right, in their behavior, which might not be centrally influenceable by any factor, but in and of itself, right? And there's a lot of unstructured data, and there's a lot of scattering of topics across different jurisdictions, and it ties into different types of modeling. We're talking about agent-based modeling. It's not a typical kind of fit the curve kind of situation, right? Then this kind of situation, I think, we need to shed more light to. Well, if we're going to be talking about data, we better educate the consumer of data, right, the commissioner of studies, as well as the supplier of data, to think better about what is it you're trying to do, what models, what the assumptions are. Use the tools correctly. Don't just go down the line of thinking, let me do a regression and everything will be fine. A lot of times regression doesn't solve your problem. You need to actually think more carefully and be a bit more scientific and talk to the professionals a bit more to actually refine what is it that you're trying to test for.
Yeah, look, I think the use of unstructured data is pretty important in the overall scheme of things, because it's often the data you don't have, which is insightful as the data you do have. And sources like social media or worldwide news sources are all being greatly considered these days in terms of impact outcomes. And the ability to sense that what people are thinking or sentiment using unstructured data, there's a number of initiatives in play these days where that can really is being brought to bear, using purely external data sources that you don't have within your business. And I think that technology of sensing a risk or opportunity, strategic and reputational risk around environmental issues or sustainability issues is a great front of mind thought for us to contemplate more.
Okay, sounds good. We have one last question, which is how are corporates collaborating with startups in this space? We are in this space because we're virtually in level 3 that actually addresses this thing. So answered right there. And I think a lot of times, startups and innovation represents the hope for the future, right? So I do see a lot of corporates working with startups to run pilots, seed ideas, push them forward. But at the end of the day, I think startups also need to think a bit more about, what can they do beyond working with corporates? Because corporates want to solve problems that they face, working with entities that they struggle to influence, right? Going to influence upstream, downstream entities and individuals along the supply chain, and adding that extra practicality into your solution will increase the adoption rate. Not just saying, we work with corporates only when you're working in an environment where you have to deal with data scarcity. A lot of issues with dealing with qualitative or unstructured data coming from unidentifiable sources or difficult to reach entities, right? So I think at the end of the day, if we're trying to work on this together, we need to actually think about how do we solve problems, not just about, how do we work with the biggest guys in the field per se, right? It is a difficult situation that we're in that we're dealing with COVID, a lot of externalities. We're trying to solve for sustainability and help companies meet their net zero 2050 goals, or even more ambitiously 2030 goals, as well as a lot of regulatory requirements, right, to preserve quality, privacy, as well as meet import, export, or procurement standards. All these technical understandings do help immensely in making sure that the data works in the right way, right, to produce the right outcomes. We can no longer afford to throw ideas out there to see what sticks and throw the biggest and meanest AI machines or blockchain or the buzzwords without knowing what really makes a difference, right, for that particular problem statement. So we have 5 more minutes. Shall we free and easy? Do we have more thoughts to share from the old dogs in the industry with the new and fresh folks in the audience?
Yeah, can I make an invitation for startups and innovators to look at the rubber sector, please?
Yeah.
I think.
Why should they do that? Why should they? The big question, why?
Yeah, the big question is, because I think we need new thinking, we need new companies, we need actually innovators, and we need new leaders. So the natural rubber is very important for many countries in terms of their own economy and in terms of the communities involved. 40 million people are involved in natural rubber. And with their families worldwide. So I think it's a huge sector that has very interesting connection with very important end use sectors such as the automotive industry. The automotive industry in itself is changing paths now, moving towards different kind of mobility, electrical vehicle, autonomous vehicle, where a lot of these technologies will be applied. But we need to change the whole value chain. So there is a huge work that could be done, and I do believe that we need young people with good scientific backgrounds that can bring new ideas in the sector and accompany the sector in this evolution in the next future. So everyone is welcome to look at rubber actually. And if anyone has need any further information, can contact me certainly, and we will give all the information that I need.
Sounds good, because without tires, your mobility
Without
doesn't
tires,
exist.
no cars. Yes.
Yeah, and it's not synthetic tires. It's not synthetic rubber. People always don't remember. It's the natural rubber, right? With its protein characteristics that saves you, not the recycled stuff.
I cannot say that. Don't put myself in a bad position with the synthetic rubber friends. Right? So I think both are needed. Both are needed to make tires, and without tires, there are no airplanes, no cars, no buses. And furthermore, if we look at the health sector, without gloves, it will be very difficult to fight for this pandemic and any pandemic in the future. So it's very strategic material.
Yes, very, very true, right? So yes, do care about rubber, do care about the primary industry. And I also, wanted to share that, Mark and I, we do explore a lot of different applications of technology, right, to address risk management needs for different types of entities. So if you want to connect with us after the event, our contact details are on the screen in the form of emails. And then the 3 little circles is to re-emphasize the point here. When we talk about using data, we want to make sure that whatever is the outcome, right, is something that's reliable, and then the data becomes something that helps the outcome to be verifiable, and then the whole process becomes efficient, right? So at the end of the day, I think it's through collaboration and communication that things can move forward, and we do hope that we can meet some of you in real life or via virtual means sometime and share our ideas and keep the conversation going, and hopefully we can work with each other in some capacity in the future. So with that said, we are right on time, like 30 seconds to go. Mark, do you have any last words?
Oh, no, look, I thanks everyone. Look, I think encourage you to think about how data may be employed. Look, it's a good thought process. It's part of the digital transformation agenda with sustainability. So yeah, keep thinking about how that may be there. And just, there's a typo in my email. It shouldn't have a K there, just MAR Woodley. So if anyone wants to ping me, feel free to just drop the K.
Oops,
yeah,
sorry.
no problems. But no, thanks again for listening, everybody. Appreciate it. And asking
Thank you very much.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.